What can I tell you about the day? It's National Egg Day today. Everything's got a day, hasn't it? National Egg Day. When's your birthday, Professor?
Well, mine's the 14th of August, but we also have National Agricultural Day, which is on the 21st of November. It's being held here in Adelaide at the McGill Winery. That's one of our great agricultural products.
Yes.
And the following day is National Mining Day, the 22nd of November. And that actually commemorates the day when Lang Hancock found iron ore deposits on the 22nd of November 1953.
Was that a Thursday?
You'll have to look it up. I'm not one of those geniuses who can tell you those sort of things.
You usually can.
Well, I can't with that. And that's being held at Moomba on the 22nd of November. So we do have national days. And in my book, there are only a couple of important national days or periods. The first is Christmas Day. Yes. Or the Christmas period. The second is Australia Day.
Yes.
The third is, depending upon the calendar, is Easter. And the fourth is Anzac Day and National Agricultural Day, because those farmers keep this country alive and feed us together with the fishermen. And National Mining Day, that actually keeps the change in the purse rattling, and that's the 22nd of November. Every other day, forget it.
Forget it.
I do like my eggs, but...
But is there a committee or something that sits down and tries to decide?
No, I don't think so. I think it's people just announce that this is National Toenail Day, and that's what happens.
Professor, I'm not sure who this is on the phone. Hello?
Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
Very well. Professor Plimer is with us. Professor Plimer and Les Ellicus and Tony Denton.
Oh, sounds like you've got a team up there.
We sure have.
Cast of thousands.
It's the A-team.
It's the A-team, fair enough. Jeremy, I wanted to just raise something that was witnessed on ABC Parliament Question Time yesterday.
Yeah.
Darren Chester, he's a Liberal member in Victoria. Yeah. He asked the Regional Affairs Minister how many he said, I'm aware that you've got many projects on your plate. He said, how many of them have you commenced in the 2.25 years that you've been in power? And she got up and started to preamble. So then he got up to bring up a point of order, and he said to the Speaker...
Relevance!
Yes, he said, Speaker, I'd like to assist the Minister if I can. And the Speaker said, go ahead. He said, I advise you it's somewhere between none and zero.
You mean they haven't commenced anything?
Anything, no.
Apart from wrecking the country?
And then, as she came back with a smart reply, she said, none is not a numeral number, she is right. None is.
Well, why didn't she just take the question on notice and say, look, I'm terribly sorry, there are so many, I couldn't possibly keep track. I'll get back to you.
Well, I think if Mr. Chester wanted a good media on this, he should have said, instead of using a number or zero, he said, you can count them on a sawmiller's hand.
Fair enough. But the next question that came up, he called out across the chamber. He said, could you tell us when you might start these projects? And she said, at the end of the week, which is meant to be today.
Yeah.
Well, my answer to that, if I was her, I would have said, I'll start them at 5:15.
But you see, Professor, you're a hell of a lot smarter than that crowd.
I don't think that's the case. I'm a lot more evil.
No.
And then just to follow it on, James Stevens here in South Australia, he got up.
Member, yes.
Yes, he got up to ask the question why the CSIRO had been given $400 million, and one of there's about 2 or 3 projects involved, but one of them is to work out the term girth
Girth by sea. Girth by sea.
Girth by sea. Yeah.
How much did they give?
$400 million.
$400 million to interpret a word or a phrase.
Yeah, and
John, I don't believe you. How would that fly?
Well, mate, I'll tell you what, the best thing to do is, with this podcast and that, you can have a look at the question time, and it just beggars belief.
What was the answer then?
The answer is that he actually just sort of said, well, the money could be used on other things. He said, after all, it is taxpayers' money, and they just said, well, we're leaving it to the CSIRO. They'll come back with an answer for us.
What will they do with the answer, Professor?
Well, it may well have been a program mapping the shoreline and the continental shelf. Right. We know far more about the land than we do about what's under the sea. So that may well have been the program, and that is an important program for military reasons, because the day of having battleships come in is gone. The day of using submarine drones is with us. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested in that. I'll go back and check on that. Mm-hmm. CSIRO, the S is there for science, scientific, and the I for industry. So it's got to have some scientific and industrial base to it.
Well, let's hope so.
Well, each CSIRO division now employs sociologists to look at the human effects of the science, and also promotional people.
Are you sure we're not overthinking this?
I think we're wasting bucket loads of money.
Yes.
It's our money.
Yes. What about thanks, John. What about the $230 million that was given to the Great Barrier Reef?
Closer to 400, and that was by Mr. Turnbull, and that was an organisation that received the money that is already very, very well funded.
What are they supposed to do with the money? I mean, the reef is the reef. The reef will go on doing its thing.
The reef is a reef, and they're monitoring the reef, and they've come up with some very, very disturbing figures. Mm-hmm. It's very healthy. It's actually growing.
We can't have that.
We cannot have that. So I think that will change if we vote in Kamala Harris. That will change. And there was something the other day where there was a chap on CNN who was claiming that you have to vote for Kamala Harris because of these hurricanes.
Yes.
Now, I don't know what he's been smoking or drinking, but
it's working.
I don't want to go near it. So there's some very, very tortured thinking around, and I think we can afford that because we're very wealthy.
Yeah. And Kamala Harris would know as much about the Barrier Reef as she would about the southern US border.
Of course.
Not a great deal.
Yes.
If anything.
Yes. Well, she's been to one once and she hasn't been to the other. So,
in fact, I was listening to Ron DeSantis the other day talking about the plans and the progress for what they're doing for the community over there, which is a lot. He's a very intelligent, learned governor. And he made the comment about the story that Harris had phoned him and that he wouldn't take the phone call. And he said, well, I've got better things to do with my time, and she's never shown any interest in Florida before, so why should she show any interest now?
And the second thing that DeSantis said was that I was talking to the president.
Yes.
I don't talk to the vice president. And I rather like that idea of talking to the organ grinder and not the monkey. Now, the organ grinder is a bit out of tune, but he has had 2 massive hurricanes in a week. That is huge for the infrastructure and the economy on Florida. And I rang a friend of mine yesterday who's got a house at Naples in Florida, which was almost in the path of the hurricane. He's just slightly back from the shore. It's not a $100 million house. It's knock a 0 or 2 off it. And his house is in good order, but he's had a lot of the vegetation destroyed. And as we remember from Cyclone Tracy, it was quite eerie seeing trees with no leaves that have been totally stripped. And that's what's happened in Florida. Flooding, because it's all very low level, roads and bridges gone. So DeSantis has got better things to do than to talk to a political aspirant who, during her term as vice president, should have achieved a lot and be voted in on that basis. She's achieved nothing, and she's now owned all the decisions of President Biden. So all of his mistakes are her mistakes.
Absolutely. And look, she, for all the commentary about what she plans for the future for the American people,
She should have done it.
Madam Vice President, you have been there and your administration has been running the show. So why haven't you done these things for us now?
That's right.
That's a good question. With the cyclonic activity and tornadoes too, I believe, the climate change people, of course, will be pointing fingers and having a wonderful time.
Yes, and they should look at NOAA and their historical records, which go back to the 1850s. And in the US, there's data, and there's especially data for Florida. And over the last 150 years, the number of hurricanes and the intensity of hurricanes has decreased.
Well, we can't have that.
No. So, yes, we have 2 in a week, but you have to look over a long period of time to make it statistically valid.
Yeah.
And by flapping your wings about one hurricane is just not valid. It's unfortunate because those people who live in wooden houses at low level are generally the poor people, and they suffer. And it's always the poor that pay.
Yeah.
And Professor, you were on Rita the other night and you made the comment, those who complain don't know history. So geographical locations like central USA, Florida, southern USA, they are prone to bad weather events, aren't they?
They certainly are, and that's because they've got warm Atlantic and Pacific waters around them. And when that hits the land, you get quite a considerable change. You often get a lot of strong winds and precipitation. I'm on Rita once a week, Rita Panahi show on Sky TV. I'm normally on Monday nights. This week I wasn't on Monday because I went to Saudi Arabia for a day, as one does. And
What was it like?
I hadn't been to Saudi for 8 years. It is a totally different country. It has grown enormously. Riyadh is now a city of 8 million people. They operate off desalinated water, the water pipe you could drive a semi-trailer through. They have energy, of course, because it's an energy-rich country. All the vegetation they've planted, they've kept it watered. It's looking fabulous. They've had massive housing developments. And
Marvellous what money can do.
well, no, it's marvellous what a new king can do. And what has happened is that when I was there last, there was a different king, and the women were wearing the full regalia.
The black outfit,
black
top to
from
bottom.
top to toe.
Yeah.
We were coming back from an evening meal in a private house where we enjoyed some wonderful French Bordeaux wines. And we were walking back to our hotel, and there was a cafe on the side of the street. Yeah. There were women by themselves with no covering, should I say no headscarves and head-to-toe covering, there by themselves without a chaperone, talking and having coffee. The country has changed enormously. Since I was there, women now can go anywhere without a chaperone. They can actually drive. Now, we would regard those sort of things as being fairly primitive and things that we should have had years ago, but Saudi is changing. What I do notice is you don't see graffiti. You don't see drug addicts around the street. You don't see people beating up others on street corners.
Or homeless.
Probably no homeless either.
People.
No.
And so we had some discussions with the Sheikh, and he was talking about the advantages of a totalitarian system compared with that of a democratic system, and pointed out that if we have a king like the one we have, a good king, then things happen. And there is a cabinet, and they feed the king various information. He works very hard, and he will come to a decision. And when he's made a decision, that's it. You don't have any NGOs
it's streamlined,
or
isn't it?
or anyone causing trouble.
It's simplified and streamlined.
And you might think of it being an Arab country as being corrupt. Well, the corruption has been solved by an absolutely novel way, which the Western press was up in arms about, but it's very, very clever. He invited all of those seriously corrupt business people, and some of them were family members, some of them were aristocrats, sheikhs in the system, to a big party at an international hotel. And I think about 460 came to that party. And then he said, gentlemen, we all know what you've been doing. We all know how much it is. You will leave this hotel when you have paid the government half of the monies he received corruptly. Either that, or you can take me on, the king, in the courts. But until that it's settled in the courts, you stay here. And he raised 190 billion for Saudi Arabia. People knew that they had been sprung. They knew that this was the end for them.
This really happened?
Yes.
Wow.
And I think it's a very novel way of approaching corruption.
Yeah.
And what it means is that if you deal with people in Saudi, all you've got to do is to find out whether they or any of their relatives were actually in this luxury hotel for a little while. And then you know whether you're dealing with people who've got a track record of being corrupt or not. So
It must have changed a great deal, because I remember
it has.
in the wake of 9/11, Barbara Walters, because it seemed like too much of a coincidence that so many of the people involved in the 9/11 attack, they all came from Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And I don't know how she swung it, but she arrived, and whether it was the king at the time, I can't really remember, but she had several professors, highly educated men. I don't know, maybe they were chosen by the government to speak up on behalf of the government or to give her the interview. I've got no idea. But she walked in, and they had the cameras rolling at the time, and she put her hand out to shake hands, and they wouldn't take her hand. And camera's still rolling. She said, well, why won't you shake my hand? And the educated, intelligent, sophisticated professor, he said, women are unclean. I don't know how you would, by getting a new king in there, how you'd actually change that sort of mentality.
I think it has changed a lot.
I hope so. I was absolutely shocked.
It's like the old expression, time is a good healer, and time does make change.
I've been guilty of making tragic mistakes in countries like that. I remember once I landed at Tehran airport, and my host, she lives in Germany, but she's an Iranian, and I gave her a big cuddle, and she lifted her knee.
Ooh.
And let me know that
I can feel it.
This was not on.
No?
But I noticed this time in Saudi, there was much more traffic. Previously, the traffic was Range Rovers, Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, the Maybach and some of these great cars, a lot of rollers and Bentleys. But this time, the roads were clogged with these luxury cars, as well as Kias and Toyotas, and it's clear the middle class are able to drive and able to buy cars.
You didn't happen to notice the cost of petrol, did you?
No, I didn't.
It's about 3 cents, I think.
Yes, well, they're a big producer of it, and Saudi is a country which is very cheap to live in, but unless you're very, very wealthy, the food diversity isn't really what we'd like, and unless you're well connected, you can't get a drink, but an alcoholic drink. But there is now an alcohol shop that has opened up in the diplomatic quarters, and a bit like in Quebec, where all alcohol is sold by the government, so they get the profits plus the tax. So they've woken up to the benefits of alcohol and the taxation. But I have to say I was very impressed. We have our security reports because of the troubles in Israel, and Egypt's a neighbour and Yemen's a neighbour on the southern side. We were getting constant security reports from the Australian government as well as the CIA, and it was, I think, probably the safest country I've ever been to. You couldn't go down the streets of Frankfurt or London or Melbourne at the hour we did and see absolutely no one who was going to accost you.
Yes.
Professor, talking about producing stuff, during the week, a colleague of mine put me onto a mineral that I've never heard of before, and I understand it's a very important mineral. It goes into semiconductors, mobile phones, lithium car batteries. Very important in the electronics
don't
field.
Keep me waiting. Tell me.
Well, no, that's a bit of a preamble. You're a good storyteller, so let me have my moment in the sun. I understand this mineral, 70% of it on the planet comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Sounds like cobalt to me.
Which has, it's a C word, so it's not cobalt. The Democratic Republic of Congo, I understand, is based on the English system of government, so it is a democracy of sorts, maybe not quite what we like. A very impoverished country, 110 million people. So it's a very populated place. This particular mineral, I believe, is composed of a couple of rare earth minerals, and the mineral itself is called coltan. And you're nodding, so you know.
Yes, I know it, yes.
But my question too is
I've never heard of it.
The significance of the product itself. We just spent with our last guest, Dr. John Bruni, talking about conflict in the Middle East. And coltan is one, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo is renowned for its conflict minerals, because the people who mine the minerals don't get a fair rate of pay. They're in slavery.
Sometimes they're children.
And children.
They are children. And the
abused.
Chinese are the main market for it. And the Chinese control it.
And no occupational health and safety conditions. Mines collapse. Very dangerous mining this coltan, because I understand it's an alluvial product, so it's in the streams and rivers. And they just dig and they don't cover up the holes. So there's all sorts of dangers, and it's not a healthy situation. But of course, our Western world needs this product.
Well, it's a mineral which is in fact two minerals dissolved in each other called columbite and tantalite. And these are niobium and tantalum minerals. Niobium, we mine, the world's greatest source of niobium is from Brazil, a little bit from Canada, and it's used in pipeline steels that have huge extremes in temperature. We have a new niobium project in the Kimberleys of Western Australia, which may well take away this monopoly from the Brazilians. Tantalite is a more interesting mineral, and I worked on tantalite projects in Greenland, which has a lot of this coltan. But tantalite has been mined in Brazil, Canada, Australia, for example, at Greenbushes in Western Australia, up in the Pilbara. There are many old tantalite mines. There's a little bit of tantalite that comes out of the tin deposits in Malaysia and Burma, and some of it came from Rwanda and Namibia, and a little bit from the Congo. So tantalite is more widespread, but tantalite is used in capacitors, and capacitors hold a charge. Tantalite is a wonderful thing for a practical joke. You have a mineral charged up, and someone touches it and they get this great bolt of lightning coming out, a bit like touching an electric fence. Now, we absolutely need tantalite for electronic parts. We absolutely need it for capacitors to hold a charge. We need it in certain sorts of alloy steels. We need it also in weaponry. We need a little bit of alloys of tantalum and niobium. So the coltan is an alluvial mineral in the Congo, less so in Rwanda and Namibia, where it's hard rock mined. I went to a mine of it in Namibia called Weiss, and that's still an operating tantalite mine. But also with the tantalite, you often get small amounts of lithium. So Australia's big lithium producer, Greenbushes Tin, was actually tin and tantalum. And when the tin price was high, they threw out the tantalum and the lithium. And when the tantalum price was high, they didn't mine the tin. And now the lithium price is high, so they're retreating the old dumps and mining the lithium from hard rock deposits. So there are many, many strategic metals around, and that is one of them. Uncle Sam is very keen to make sure that the strategic metals do not get into the hands of the Chinese, and they're taking very active interests in the world's second biggest rare earth element deposit at Mount Weld in Australia. There's a third one being built in Australia. And their deposit in Mountain Pass in California is being revived. So Uncle Sam tries to make sure that the supply of commodities is not controlled by hostile foreign entities. And when we were looking for tantalite or coltan in Greenland, a shareholder of this London-listed public company. It was Uncle Sam. I was involved with another company called Ivanhoe, and we found a resource of rhenium in Queensland. Now, there's about 75 tonnes a year of rhenium that's produced, mainly as a byproduct from copper mining, and there's a molybdenum mineral, which you take out of that, which has got a trace of rhenium in it. And that we get from Chile, from the US, and from Poland, from Lublin in Poland. So that rhenium is used in turbine blades. And if you want to spin a turbine on a jet much faster and have the jet go quicker, then you have a lot of tantalum. You have a lot of rhenium in that turbine blade. So if you want to have a jet and fly at Mach 4 or Mach 5, you need rhenium. So as soon as we found this rhenium deposit in North Queensland, I was at a conference and there was a gentleman there, crew cut, jacket and tie, and his name on a badge, and he handed me his business card, and it was Fred Bloggs, CIA Resources Division. And they basically said to us, look, we're the buyer of anything that you might produce. So there is a geopolitical group around the world looking at commodities, looking at who's trading what, who's found what, who's mining what. At this stage, you'd have to say that some of the strategic metals are in the hands of China, like rare earth elements. That's changing, like tungsten, which is used for hardening steels in battlements. And I guess the other one is antimony. And we have a little bit in Australia at Hillgrove in New South Wales and Fosterville in Victoria. And we produce a lot out of Port Pirie as a byproduct. So Uncle Sam is looking at every single gram of metal that's used in the world.
Professor, do you think the Americans are onto something when they say they don't want any more Chinese cars because they just could be spying, they could be doing all kinds of things, monitoring? Is that possible?
Well, I think it is. I think the Australian government was well ahead of its time in banning Huawei, the telecommunications company. And I know then that Alexander Downer was sitting on the board of Australian Huawei, and he was absolutely rapeable, but and he was one of our best foreign ministers we ever had, but I thought he was wrong on that one. Mm-hmm. And I think the Americans are doing the right thing. We have now the ability to turn off a country's power system or their water system or their sewage system or their telephone system.
So do you mean we should be doing the same thing?
We should be independent. In other words, we shouldn't be using an internet system and FM signals to run our power stations from a central location. Mm. We should be having people on site running a closed system, and then we can't be hacked.
Yeah, makes sense. Twiggy Forrest closed down his green hydrogen project. And I see now that, is it AGL who've done the same thing?
Yes, AGL have done
it. So where does that leave green energy?
Well, it leaves them in a very difficult position, but everyone who knew their stuff knew that this was chasing subsidies. It had nothing to do with cheap energy. We have a proposal in front of us at present, and I got a call from the local member yesterday, Colin Boyce, the federal member for the seat of Flynn, and that's inland from Gladstone. And he was telling me that Gladstone wants to have a hydrogen production plant there of 800 tonnes a day. That's an order of magnitude higher than any other plant in the world. And we were talking about how explosive it is and how you could take out Gladstone in one hit. And I've said, look, we tried this in the mid-19th century. It failed. We tried it in the 1920s and 1930s. It failed. And it'll fail again for the same reason.
So why are they persevering with something that's been a failure?
Subsidies. It's got nothing to do with the thermodynamics, which actually says you shouldn't be doing it. You're wasting energy. If you can try to say that you're generating clean green energy from sunbeams and sea breezes, and then using that energy to make hydrogen, which when you burn the hydrogen, you actually create the most powerful greenhouse gas there is, and that's water vapor. There's people chasing subsidies.
I know. Can you stay with